Well, welcome everybody. Talk to you today about programmatic marketing. How many people are from, I know there's one group from an agency here. Anybody else from an agency? The other people, I know there's a group of students as well, graduate students. Are there publishers? One publisher? Brands? No brands? That's what it's clients are at. All right. So anyway, let's get started. A little bit about me. I'll try to make this short and easy to digest. Programmatic has a lot of buzzwords and terms and acronyms, and it can be really confusing. Just some background. I'm self-taught in online marketing. I basically got a bachelor's in IT and quickly discovered that I was no good at fixing computers, nor did I like it. So I had more fun building the website for my business than I did actually doing what I was supposed to be doing. So I pursued building websites and trying to monetize them, so make money off the websites. And that's how eventually I got around to learning SEO, social, programmatic, and every other type of advertising online. I've spoken at a few conferences around, such as Modern Marketing Summit and ATS from ExchangeWire. They both, I think, do something here in Miami every year. If you can get an invite, try and go. It's pretty interesting. Most recently, I was the head of digital for Havas Media here in Miami, and I was there for about 7 years. Worked with brands like Nintendo, Barcelona Hotels, basically all of them, trying to bring them on to do more digital, right? In my spare time, I founded ProgrammaticAcademy.com, which was kind of an online training site, if you will. Early on, when I was first hired to start what's called the trading desk at Havas, I quickly saw the importance that programmatic would have, and so I bought a domain name and kind of put it to the side until I had time to build upon it, and so that's where I'm at right now. Currently consulting as well with direct clients, and so that's what I'm doing. Some background to learn how we got to where we're at as far as programmatic and advertising. I was talking to the professor here about the 90s, which seemed like just the other day, but what, 25 years ago? So around 1994 was when, I guess, the commercial part of the internet started really taking off. We had a bunch of, publishers like Yahoo, ESPN. So people started getting online. It became a lot cheaper and not by the hour as it used to be. 1996, we saw ad networks start to appear, like advertising.com, ValleyClick, things like that. Google actually started gained the #1 search engine ranking around 2000. Before that had been Yahoo and a bunch of other smaller ones. Programmatic started probably around 2005 to 2007 with a company called Right Media, which would then be bought out by Yahoo years later. And they actually patented the first kind of RTB technology, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So 2010, we see some of the trading desks from the agency side, such as Saxis and AFIPERF. And so that's when kind of the big agencies started taking notice and using programmatic for their clients' campaigns. And then 2011, 2013, we started seeing a lot of publishers and more conferences and things like that. So anyway, the funny thing is that, as I'll mention later, we're pretty much back to square one and buying individual sites as we started to, but we'll go into that a bit now. So in the beginning, when you wanted to buy a site, right, or a placement, you as an advertiser, you reached out to, the publisher, Yahoo in this case, and you said, I want, 50 million impressions. They give you the price. You sent the banners. They ran it. Funny thing is, some of the banners back then didn't even have click-throughs. It was just impressions. So, very manual process. But the internet was small back then, so it worked for a time. So as we started to get bigger and more complicated, we had a lot more sites coming up. Everybody was buying their own domain name and publishing content online because more and more people were getting online. So it became kind of a hassle to buy through IOs, individually all the placements that you wanted. So that basically led to the creation of ad networks, right? So an ad network is basically a group, a company site that consolidates a bunch of sites and either categorize them by interests or other targets, and then sells it like that. So it's a much more efficient way to buy as a buyer by going through an ad network back then. And also, I want to point out that when I'm talking about programmatic today, it's from the buying perspective, because there's a whole other part, which is the selling perspective, which is if you're a publisher, you want to sell your inventory. We'll discuss a little bit about that, but the majority of it will be from a buying perspective, right? So ad networks started growing. There was some concern with lack of transparency, which seems to have continued up until now, really. Transparency is still an issue with some of the programmatic. But anyway, when ad networks started growing, and there were a lot of ad networks, this was the time when Right Media kind of came about, how I mentioned, creating what's called an ad exchange. And an ad exchange encompasses publishers, ad networks, different types of formats, so it's just basically a huge marketplace of impressions online, users that you want to reach, right? The problem became, though, how to buy all this inventory. Yes?
What's an impression?
What's an impression? Right. So when you log onto a website and it downloads onto your screen, that would be one impression. Yeah? Is that a good? Okay.
Just think of exposure, like a person behind that, ad being served.
Yeah. A lot of these terms kind of got adopted from TV, impression, spot, things like that. So, yeah. If you guys have any questions, let me know, because I'll assume that you understand, and anyway, let me finish here. So basically, with the ad exchange, there was just a ton of inventory online, meaning available impressions to buy, and to buy them smartly was very difficult. So algorithms were created, and this is kind of where the DSP and everything else that we're going to talk about comes in on how to buy programmatically. So why exactly did programmatic kind of grow a lot and become so popular? It provided effectiveness. Initially, when programmatic was sold to clients, I think there was a big injustice done, because the people selling it kind of sold it as a way of getting cheaper clicks or remnant inventory, and that was probably true for a lot of cases. But nowadays, it's much more than that, and so it provides effectiveness. A lot of performance is seen with programmatic control. If you know exactly what's going on, if you're managing a programmatic campaign, you can block sites, you can add sites, you can see the bidding costs. So there's not that kind of black box issue that happens with the ad networks. As I mentioned, transparency, you can see pretty much everything that's going on, much more now than a few years ago when programmatic started. Learn a lot about your audience, learn a lot more insights, like what time are they buying, what sorts of activity they do, as far as what else are they doing. So if you're running a travel campaign, obviously you know that your target is interested in travel. But when you're running a programmatic campaign, you can take that audience and see what else they have a high affinity to. So maybe they also like shopping for electronics, and that can kind of be an angle that you can create another strategy for when creating your campaign. So there's a lot of data that can be gained from programmatic. And also efficiency. I mean, it isn't just a way to buy cheaper. A lot of times it is, a lot of times it isn't. But usually you can get access to premium inventory sites through programmatic at a much lower rate than you can if you went direct to the publisher. And that's basically because if I have access to, I'll give you an example, MSN, I don't need to involve them for anything. Their inventory is already online. I can just add them as a whitelist or add them as a private deal, which I'll go into later. And instead of paying whatever it is, $2 or $3 CPMs that they want to sell me, I'm paying 25, 30 cents.
What is CPM?
So CPM is cost per mil.
Cost per thousand.
Cost per thousand. Yeah, mil in black. Yeah. So cost per thousand. So I mentioned impressions, right? So 1 impression is when the page loads. CPM is 1,000.
Yeah, the cost to reach 1,000 people.
Right, 1,000 impressions. It could be the same person twice.
Right.
Those are unique impressions.
Yeah, unique impressions, and that's something that when you set up a campaign, you can control that by frequency cap. Exactly. Knowledge. Actually, I think that's probably the most important one if you're an agency or you're, a brand that does programmatic in-house. So before having access to this sort of technology, you would, the client would give the campaign over to the agency. The agency would basically do some RFPs to, the networks or the publishers, and the agency would hand off the campaign to them. They would run it. You really had no way of proving if it ran as they say it ran or not. And also, you're not really learning anything besides planning. If you're in an agency, you can get more involved with programmatic in the campaigns and actually have that knowledge of how to run campaigns in-house, and you're much more knowledgeable to speak to your clients as well when you have this access. Somebody had a question? So I would say and a problem that a lot of people have is that, especially people that come from, old school media, with programmatic, is that it's not really a straightforward tactic to use. It's not black and white. A lot of things with programmatic fall into a gray area, right? Because it's not just buying sites. The point of all of this is to buy what are called audiences. So, if you have, I'll go back to the travel example. If you have a client that's a travel client and you're looking for people to book, hotels, you're interested in people that want to book hotels. You're not interested in people that are on Yahoo or on ESPN or on any other websites. So the point is to go after the audience, not the site, right? Not the media. So that's where I think a lot of people have trouble with understanding what it is. And it's basically just technology, finding a better way to target the right person. The way that I look at it is like Lego blocks. You can build it any way you want, a campaign, or just connecting different pipes. If one publisher doesn't work, one source of traffic doesn't work, you can block it, you can put another, you can add, you can take away. So
I have a question.
Yes?
If you're on the agency side, you're the buyer. How does that look? To buy programmatic, how do you hop on the programmatic train?
How do you hop on
Because one thing that you mentioned is going specific to the publisher, sending them an RFP, waiting for the publisher to answer back, and this is what we can sell you. Or you can buy programmatic. So how does buying programmatic look from the agency buying side?
So the point that you mentioned are what would be called private deals, right? And I'll go over those in a little bit because there's basically 3 types of programmatic buying that you can do. One of them being private deals.
But is this like software?
Yes. Oh,
I just want to see.
Yeah. So usually the way it would work is if you're in a global agency like OMD, Havas, some of the others, they'll probably already have some sort of commitment with one of the major DSPs like MediaMath, Trade Desk, what's another one? Google, obviously, DBM.
So it's like a stock exchange, and you have to register for your chosen exchange, and then you use your profile to go on and register for what is being sold, right? I think the question is like 1, 2, 3. How do I get started?
Sure. So yes, usually the agency would have some sort of commitment with one of these companies, a DSP. The DSP will then provide you access. With that access, you have what's called a seat, like she mentioned, at the exchange. And then basically the way it looks is you log into a platform. If anybody's used AdWords, it's kind of similar to that sort of thing. You log into a platform and you set your campaign name, your budgets, it's pretty similar in that regard. It's just what goes on in the background is a little different.
And the audience that you're looking for, like demographics, psychographics, and then it looks for the match.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. Through third-party data, or first-party data, which we'll cover.
But you don't have to be from a global agency.
No, you don't have to be.
You can be one person.
It could be one person, exactly. It's just you'll probably have to go through smaller companies that don't require, a huge commitment. For example, the trade desk asks for a minimum of $20,000 a month. Media Math as well, some other crazy numbers. So if you're an independent consultant, you need to go through other companies, which if you need to know, I can give you some recommendations. So supply and demand, like Lucy mentioned, it's basically, putting into effect the basic law of economics. There's the buyer, there's the seller, on the publisher side, which are the websites, and the inventory is right in the middle, and that's where the bidding comes in, and the buying, which I'll go into now. Now, this is sort of the ecosystem that Programmatic lives in, or is made up of. And at the end here, we have the advertiser investing, the agency trade desk. It could be either the agency or the agency trade desk. They're kind of, when Programmatic first took off, the agencies wanted to separate themselves from the trade desk, but now it's kind of getting pushed back to where it's fine that the agency is the one buying. So, for example, when I was in Havas, they created a company called AFIPER, which is a terrible name, by the way, but so to kind of separate themselves from the buying, right? But either way, in the end, people know it's part of Havas, it's supposed to take company. So the agency trade desk usually connects to some sort of ad server, Sysmic, DFA, or whatever it's called now. Google changes its name every year. DCM. What is it?
Google 360 now.
Yeah.
Google 360, you're right, of course. And then, so anyway, you put up you can connect, and the way you connect the ad server to the DSP is you don't connect it, you just, the tags or whatever for the banners, you upload to the DSP. You can do it direct. If you're not using an ad server, you can just do it direct as well, and just directly load your creatives here on the DSP end. And then the DSP is the one that's pretty much connected to the ad exchange. So within this ad exchange is where all the traffic is, all the websites, the ad networks, all that sort of thing. Real-time bidding is a big part, not only what powers this transaction, but it's a big part of what it does. You also have data that you can feed into the DSP. You have a DMP, which we'll discuss, is basically a data management platform. And then on the other side, you have your SSP, which is the one similar to this one, except in that case, it's the publisher selling its inventory. They also use ad servers, and then at the end, obviously, it's the user that logs onto the site, so then the site will...
Okay, so DSP and SSP, what does it stand for?
Right, so demand side platform, supply side platform. Yeah. And the thing is, a lot of people get confused because some companies are both. So like AppNexus, for example, is an SSP and a DSP.
So,
yes.
Can you take us through like an example of a case study, how somebody would go on and use this?
Yeah. So an agency trade desk, right? Talked a little bit about this already. Sometimes the agency, like Saxis, creates their own proprietary software to use. in order to buy through DSPs and programmatically. Sometimes they don't, but I think the bigger ones do because it's more feasible to them, and in order to connect through a lot of their internal programs that they have as well. A demand-side platform, like I mentioned, is a tool for the trading desk. It's basically called the trading desk as well for the advertisers. This is where you buy. It's a piece of software. You log in, you set up your placements, your campaigns, you put on your budget, and you basically launch the campaign. It's pretty straightforward. If we had more time, I could go through and show you examples of what it looks like on the inside. Basically, it's a central access, to publishers, networks, exchanges, targeting, control options, pretty good reporting as well, optimization and algorithms. One of the big differentiators, I would say, between choosing a DSP is the sort of algorithm they use. Because essentially most have access to the same inventory. So Google, for example, is probably 50% of all traffic anyway. So most people are connected to Google in some sort of way. You got other exchanges like OpenX and a few others. So the access point to programmatic, being a DSP, is differentiated by, how well their algorithm buys that inventory, meaning how well it performs for your campaigns. There's other things as well, such as fees that you have to pay, and usability issues. But generally speaking, it's pretty similar as far as access. So on the other end, the SSP is a tool for publishers, right? Basically, the piece of software used to try and sell their inventory in an automated fashion. This is also in addition to salespeople that they have, because a lot of publishers still use salespeople, right? It helps their yield management, which means how much money they make. Do you have a question? Oh. They also can provide price floors. So if I'm selling, I can say I'm not selling for less than 50 cent CPM. Okay. And nowadays, it's gotten a little bit more robust for the seller with header bidding and things like that. And header bidding is technology that I'm not really equipped to explain, but it was a tool for publishers to use to try and gain more revenue, because what was happening was they were losing out a lot with all the buyers. So, and they had no way to combat this. So header bidding is kind of a very technical thing, but essentially it was something built to help them increase their revenue. So how is a DSP used, right? A trader is usually the person that uses a DSP as far as going in and managing campaigns. It's not usually, if you're in an agency, it's not usually the media planner. It could be if they want to learn. I always encouraged it to at least log in and look at reporting, for example, and gain some insights that way. So the trader decides what DSP he wants to use for a campaign. Because what happens, especially with the big agencies, you'll have access to a few different platforms, DSPs, that you can work with. Because not one is good at everything. Some are good at display, some are good at video. So you get to choose, which one is best for the campaign you have at hand. The trader uploads, optimizes the campaigns. The trader can also negotiate deals. This is where private deals come in. Meaning, I don't want to upload a campaign and run it on what's called the open exchange, meaning just out there in very loose targeting. I want to upload a campaign and I want to run it on, Vox.com or whatever, some specific site, ESPN.com. And so what the trader will do is go in through the DSP and create a private deal. Meaning he'll probably call up you could do it through the platform, or you can just have a call and tell them, do we agree on this CPM? Yes. So then once that's agreed upon, you get what's called a deal ID, and that way you can use that to target that
So
that
sorry,
buyer.
the trader is the buyer.
The trader's the buyer.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they call it trader.
They call it trading.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's a.
It's sexy.
It sounds fancy, right? Trader. Not trader. Usually, if you're hiring or you're managing digital people, a trader can handle about 30 campaigns, depending on how complicated they are. So yeah. The SSP, like I said, on the other end of the spectrum is selling their inventory. And what will happen is when you're a buyer, you get hit up a lot from publisher sales reps, right? I'll give you X amount of impressions at X amount of price, and so that's what they're involved in. So not only with technology that can be sold for them online, but also physically and manually, I guess through snail mail, you can set up deals with SSPs or salespeople.
So let me ask you, does Programmatic eliminate that salesperson?
A lot of it, yeah. And that was a big complaint with, the publishers, is that they had the power was taken away from them with Programmatic, right? Before, I remember paying $40 CPMs in, specific formats for specific countries. But once Programmatic came in, and it's like, I don't need you anymore. I can just buy it through here. And so that's why, publisher rates went down and collapsed, basically. And so that's why they turned to that technology I was telling you about, header bidding. Look it up. It's kind of complicated to understand, so I don't want to get into that. But yeah, that's basically what happened.
Wait, but how do publishers allow that to be taken away from them in the first place? Like for people to bid through the other platforms instead of direct. Right?
Because most publishers are already connected in some sort of way, and people were just not buying the direct IO buys anymore. So, if I'm not buying direct IO and I'm just buying out here in open exchange, I'm no longer having to pay that.
They don't have an exclusivity thing where you have to buy it directly from them.
It's kind of coming back around for certain sites. You have to be very big to ask for exclusivity or what are called walled gardens. So like Facebook, for example, you can't buy Facebook anywhere else but Facebook. Initially, though, they did put themselves out through Programmatic and allow themselves to be accessed through a lot of these DSPs, but they're like, no, you know what? We're too big. We don't need it. YouTube was another one. YouTube was accessible to be bought, through exchanges, but they're like, we're Google. You can either buy through us or don't buy it at all. And, you had to.
I think it's like you said, some publishers too. If you want to have an ad on WebMD, that'll cost you $25,000. Like, that's it. You just deal with their salespeople, or you're not on WebMD.
So they don't go through these platforms.
I think like if they're big enough and they're popular enough and enough people are coming and buying their inventory, like of course they want to make more money. But for a lot of these sites, they had so much inventory and half of them didn't want to pay their salespeopeople anyway. So
that's true too.
They gladly went on there in the first place, and that way they're always guaranteed that at least money's coming in from somewhere.
There's also different levels to that because and I'll discuss this in a couple of slides as well. There's also a couple levels. So there's something called first look. So first look is like what publishers consider the most valuable impression. And usually what will happen is, and that means when you get right on their site for the first time, meaning you have the most interest in what it is you're looking for, that's first look. So what they'll do is they'll reserve that for private deals and a higher price. Usually what it is you log in and you can go to a marketplace within the DSP and you can see deals offered by all different kinds of publishers. WebMD might have 100,000 impressions for $20 CPMs. You can just click on it, buy that deal, run your campaign. You can't do that through Facebook. You can't do that through Google AdWords. You can do it through DBM, but not Google AdWords. That's what the difference is. It's basically technology that connects a lot of
It's kind of like an eBay for ad agencies.
It's kind of like an eBay, exactly. Because a lot of it runs on when it runs on Open Exchange RTB. It is an auction, and we'll go over that as well. Unless you agree to a private deal, which is usually then a set CPM. Yes.
Is there a way to see what websites are available?
That's a tough one
You can
because
say which websites you don't want it run on.
what's that?
You can say which websites you don't want it
Yeah.
run on. If you're selling a specific product,
Yeah.
so you don't want it to be shown anywhere, because you have a specific target audience, a specific
Right.
product.
Well, that's the thing, and that was like when I first started selling programmatic to our clients. That was the big. I would go into this whole presentation about finding the right audience, regardless of media or websites. But the question I always got at the end was, well, what sites are we going to run on? Because that's kind of like the mentality of it. And the promise of programmatic is, who cares what site it runs on as long as you're reaching the right target? Because, for example, we had at Havas, we had a lot of fragrance products and a lot of products geared towards women, right? And then, so every media plan would just have, for Latam and Femenino, and, it's like, women also read the news, women also follow sports, so why not, just find women in anywhere online that fits the target rather than just buy that one specific site. You know what I mean? But you can, if you want to say, I only want to run on these 10 sites, you can launch a campaign, create what's called a whitelist, put those 10 domains on there, and then it'll only run on those.
But you pay more.
It depends.
It sounds like a run of site, like an ROS.
Well, it's not really you could do ROS, but within the platform you can target. And we'll go into third-party targeting as well, first-party targeting. Because it's a lot to take in. I know we don't have like an hour or so. These are the three big ones. So the way most people understand programmatic is the RTB, real-time bidding. You bid a certain amount. You get impressions for that amount. It's where the largest amount of inventory is available. There's also private exchanges. So companies or publishers that have their own exchanges, you have to be invited in or allowed to bid on. And usually there's a minimum that you will bid on. So here you can probably find inventory, and I have found inventory for 5 cent CPMs. Private exchange, they'll usually set some sort of minimum floor price. So the minimum to bid is 50 cents, but it's probably higher. And then programmatic direct is the private deals where I only want to buy this site and this site and this site, and I'm going to pay 10, 5, and 8 CPM. So that's kind of the difference. The programmatic direct or private deal is essentially a modernized version of how we used to buy in the 90s through an IO and one site, if that makes sense.
Can I ask you something?
Yeah.
The private exchange, so that restricts the auction to what? Like a certain demographic group or what?
No, that restricts your ability to buy them cheaper than they're asking for.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And usually you have to be allowed to bid on it. It's not just out there. You have to get.
So what kind of websites or what kind of sites would be there?
A lot of publishing groups have created their own exchanges, right? And so you basically, if you think that your campaign will do well on their exchanges, you basically agree to their minimum floor price, ask to be able to bid on it, and then you're allowed to bid on it.
How does click fraud play in all of this?
Click fraud, well.
I'm gonna go there, sorry.
Yeah, sure. No, I mean, whenever especially in the last few years, whenever you say programmatic, fraud is right there, at the top of the list as far as topics. Click fraud is always going to be around. Because there's too much money in it. I mean, these people are making millions and millions, and when there's money involved, it's not easy to get rid of, right? I think it's much better now than in 2012, 2013, 2014, when everybody was getting in on the game. But it's still very difficult to really determine if it's a real user or a bot.
There's no guarantee. Like if I'm on a marketing side of the business and I go in, how do I, or even like representing a politician who's got to be, on specific. I don't want him showing up on a porn site or something. There's no guarantee. You're coming in for this type of shit.
Those are two different things though. So click fraud is, when you're getting clicks from bots and your campaign stats look amazing. If it's a branding campaign, you're actually never going to know if it was real or not because there's no purchase or action that has to take place. What you mentioned, if you're running through known DSPs, you're not going to run into too many issues, right? Usually, what happens with that is you can either use what's called a third party, I forget the name now, verification partner. Meaning that for every bid that takes place, they verify whether it's human or not, or the page is something that you want your banner to appear on or not. And this bid happens before your banner is exposed to the user. So verification partners like that could be part of that. There's also a lot of agencies will run blacklists that get updated on a weekly basis. I have a list still that has like 60,000 URLs suspected of fraud or just weird behavior or just don't work. Are
you going to discuss the KPIs that are involved with this later on?
Well, yeah, we could talk about KPIs. Yeah.
I'll save my question.
Sure. So the way that the RTB works, or the auction process online works is, the user lands on a website or a page. The publisher sends out the request via their SSP, right? So the SSP pushes the user info to the exchanges to sell. It says, I just got this user, and this user has browsed this site, so his profile looks to be somebody that is into, home improvement, probably about age 30 to 45, male, etc. They push that out to the exchange, and then on the buying side, the bidder determines if that's a valuable enough impression for their campaign to bid on. And so if it is, what will happen is there's multiple people bidding on, that impression, that person. You have three bids, right? $1, $1.10, and $1.15. This guy obviously wins, but he only winds up paying $1.11 because it's a cent higher than the second highest bid, which is second price auction. I think it's called second price bid.
But it's not people sitting there pressing.
No. All this happens every time you load and load a page that has advertising on it. It's within 100 milliseconds or something like that.
So the algorithm.
Exactly. Yeah. You won't see it happening. But basically, if you're getting fed an ad, somewhere along the way, that advertiser determined that you were worth bidding on for whatever reason. Usually, it's retargeting. You already visit their sites, so they're bidding on you again. So.
Is there a difference between programmatic and retargeting?
Yes. So programmatic is.
And just your general interests.
Well, retargeting is one part of programmatic. Put it that way. Okay. Yeah.
Retargeting is only if they visited your site, right? Or if they like you.
Yeah. It could be different things. If you can retarget almost anything, right? So you can retarget if they've seen 10 seconds of your video and you want to show them the other part. You can retarget if they've...
if they saw it on Facebook or on YouTube or
Yeah. If they, I think, think about that for a second.
Cookies. Yeah, Facebook cookies.
They should. I mean, yeah, it should, exactly. But you can retarget on banner. If they saw your banner, if they, if they clicked on the banner but didn't make it to this, I mean, you can retarget anywhere you can put a pixel. You can retarget, basically. You can retarget an app. You can retarget pretty much anything. This is just another example of how R2B works.
What's a pixel?
A pixel. Oh, we'll go into that in graphic detail. So, so I mentioned private exchanges. I mean, it's just that. I'm not going to go over it again in detail, but basically, you ask for access to their exchange so you can bid on it. Because usually, when it's closed off from having a lot of just any traffic, it's a little higher quality. But you're also going to pay a little higher price for that. So usually, it's just getting access to that. And then programmatic direct as well. It's you want a specific website. You just agree to a CPM, and you run your campaign. Private deals. If you're ever going to run one, for some reason, technically have a lot of problems. I don't know why it is. I've been with one of my clients now trying to get something. It took me a month to get one campaign going. I'm going to go into details, but just be prepared if we're trying to run private deals. They work great when they work, but...
A private deal is when you buy directly from the website?
Yeah, through a programmatic platform.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
With this private deal, for example, can you cherry pick like want to be on the first page, the main page?
Yeah, I mean, as long as the publisher, the way things are now...
Price is higher, right?
Yeah, exactly. But publishers are pretty accommodating. Yeah, publishers are pretty accommodating. Unless it's a publisher that's sold out, you can probably negotiate almost anything.
What about the content? Do they check the content? I mean, sometimes like a publisher doesn't want some kind of ad.
Oh yeah, a lot of publishers won't take.
How do they do it through those systems? Are they able to check or?
Well, when you run programmatic, you upload your banners, right? You upload your banners, and with that, you upload your landing page. It doesn't just start automatically. It goes through an audit. Exactly. So it goes through an audit. Google audits every single banner that comes through. Some others audit as well. And so they'll check the banner. They'll check, if you have things like a privacy policy. They'll check if it's, gambling or something that's not authorized. So it's not just, go and run, because otherwise people would run whatever. Yeah.
Alcohol, tobacco,
yeah.
gambling.
You can get an exclusion if like for alcohol. Depending on the network, it's very strict though. Like beer, for example, on Facebook requires process. If now with politics, for example, you need to be verified in a lot of things to be able to run. So yeah, it's not just set it up and go. So big data. Big data is kind of an old term, I guess. A couple of years ago it was big. It's not that big anymore. But data's still around, and it's basically at the core of what programmatic uses to feed itself when it's learning, right? The only stats I can find were from these years, because they're very private about how much data they capture, but it's just know it's a lot. Volume of business data worldwide across all companies doubles every 1.2 years. So there's a lot of data. And when you're running campaigns, you capture a lot of data as well. The way to do that is through a pixel. So you've heard me mention pixel a couple times. Pixel is nothing more than a 1x1 image, right? You export this from the platform, you install it on your page, and you automatically start capturing, users or loads, as they're called, to the site. And so now that you have this installed, you can then retarget to all users that came to that site. And you can also use this to measure conversions, for example. You put the pixel on the thank you page after somebody takes an action. That's when you measure conversions. So that way, for example, you can then exclude that user. If they already bought something, you don't have to waste impressions on them anymore. So that's a way to do that. But the pixel, I mean, it's a small, tiny thing, piece of code, just like that. You put it on your site, and yeah, that's how it's captured. And you can use this for targeting as well. All right. A DMP. So a DMP is another part that is, like I said, if you look at it as Lego blocks, sorry. A DMP. So a lot of businesses have an email database, right? Because it's smart to have that. It's extremely valuable. A DMP is basically a version of an email database, except it's for people that have interacted with your campaign. Okay, so essentially what it does is it captures that audience, and usually through some type of ID anonymously. But basically, you'll have what's called a warehouse of data that you can then use to not only analyze and gain a lot of insights from, but also to target again. A DMP is also something you can use to upload your CRM data to. So, for example, if you use Salesforce, you can connect that to a DMP and then run a campaign targeting all of your users on Salesforce. I think a lot of platforms now let you connect Salesforce directly to the DSP as well. So you can target that, and it's extremely powerful when you have that. And that is what is called first-party data. That's yours. So anybody coming to your site, any email that you have, things like that are what are called first-party data. Okay? So once you have that data, you can then use that to target your campaign, right? Target audiences and data segment. Data segments is a fancy term for people that like to shop, people that like to travel, people interested in cars, etc. That's a segment. Contextual channels is more broad. So a page talking about travel would be a contextual page. And then searches, you can target people that search for specific things. A lot of sites capture their own search data and make that available for targeting. So you can capture people that search for specific things. Technology, you can target people by connection speed, which as we move towards everybody having broadband is becoming less and less relevant. But you can do that through ISP. We had at Havas we had Telefonica, it's a big carrier in LATAM, and so we would target only people that weren't on their ISP already. So that became very valuable. Browser OSs, things like Macs, etc., Windows, and then obviously through Geo, you can do all sorts of targeting down to geofencing, which is like within 3 meters around you or something like that. It's pretty precise. Time of day, time of week. This is good to see when you run a campaign also. Once you start seeing trends on when people are buying or taking actions more, you can kind of segment out that campaign to those hours. And that way you don't waste money on times that aren't converting. You can, like I said, you can target specific sites, you can block sites, and then with the pixels, of course, you can target people that visited certain pages, bought certain items. So for example, if somebody already bought something, you don't want to retarget them with the same thing, but you might want to upsell them something. So if they bought an iPhone, why not retarget them with a case, for example? So what does this data mean? If you have all this available to you, it gives you what works in online advertising, which is targeting and control. Without that, a a lot of campaigns just won't work. So it's crucial to capture and use that data correctly. So about formats. Formats, and this means like banners, videos, things like that. The point of a format is basically to engage the user, to try and take an action, to reach and hopefully get them to convert to something that we want them to do, some action we want them to take. When Programmatic first started, the thing that was used most, I would say the format that was used most, was the standard banner. This is still, don't get me wrong, it's still widely used, and probably the majority of inventory online is with standard banners, like 300 by 600 or 300 by 250, and still widely used. It's still widely available, and likely has the least amount of cost associated with it. But Programmatic has kind of gone beyond just just beyond standard, and the ability to buy in-stream, out-stream video, video banners, just a lot of different formats in video is now available, and it can be easily done. So that's also an option. Like I said, YouTube is the king of pre-roll. If you need YouTube, you have to go through DBM. But there's still a lot of inventory for video online. One in particular, for example, is the what they call outstream or in-read format. And if you've seen an article that doesn't have video content, but as you scroll, it opens up and the video starts, you hover over, you hear the sound. That was a pretty ingenious way to create video inventory where none existed, because in Programmatic, at least, video inventory was really not available. It was lacking. So Teads came around and created that format, and now everybody's copied it, and it's pretty available, pretty widely available. So yeah, that was a good idea for them. Other formats, rich media formats, are also available programmatically. This is like back in the day when you had a portal and you had a big launch for a brand, you would do a takeover or whatever. You can buy skins now through Programmatic. You can do things like the Lightbox and other of these rich media formats that are used.
Sorry, this is about the slide before.
Yeah.
What about video?
What about Vimeo?
Yeah, like what do you feel about that?
It's a platform. I use it to host some videos, but I honestly, it's kind of not a big player in video. To be honest, I don't go on there much, man. I host some videos on there, but that's about it. But there is no competition to YouTube as far as I know. Facebook is probably the second biggest one as far as video. By the way, if you do run video campaigns, put subtitles on them, because people, I think it's like 50% of people don't read don't have the sound on. Rich media formats. A couple of others, out of home and sound, or audio, I should have put. So audio ads, Spotify, Pandora, things like that. Actually, Spotify was one that was, at least last time I tried to run a campaign there in the US, they were booked solid as far as inventory. So they were very, very, a lot of advertisers are very interested in running on them. But you can still find a lot of publishers selling audio ads in a programmatic way. And you upload an MP3 and you run that as your ad. Out of home is not as big. It's growing, and honestly, I think what happens is that Clear Channel and the other company has such a hold on billboards and out of home that, and also it's a kind of a difficult thing to make all these things programmatically available, right? There are places with banners billboards and other smaller displays that you can buy that are considered technically out of home. But I had somebody I was reading the other day. He was getting a bunch of impressions for out of home. He was excited because there was a lot of engagement and all this, whatever. But it happens that the out-of-home placement was on a cash register, a self-serve cash register. So it was a screen like this, and the banner was, a little thing like that. And so I guess technically it was out of home, but the format was, it's useless. But yeah. Mobile, I didn't want to get specifically to mobile because a big part of running something programmatically is to target the user regardless of where they're at, whether it's on mobile, desktop, whatever. So if you're running for mobile specifically, I would use formats that aren't very intrusive because it's extremely annoying for the user and probably will cost you in conversions. And that's about it as far as what I have. You guys have any other? I know there's a ton of questions.
Like 2 years ago, I talked to a general manager of a major station, and he was telling me that television was doing the programmatic.
That's a good one. I forgot to include that one. So yeah, the big thing was that TV was going to go programmatic, right? Network TV, I don't see going programmatic anytime soon because they charge a ton of money, like NBC and all the other, regular. What has happened is that a lot of the free apps or even the paid apps like Hulu have advertising. That's programmatic TV. It's called connected TV. That is a pretty useful option. I would say the only thing is to be careful in which platforms you buy or which apps you buy, because usually how that's done is through smart TVs that offer a bunch of different content apps.
Like over the top?
What's that?
Over the top?
OTT. Yeah, OTT, exactly. Yeah. So what happens is, a lot of the apps that offer free content on smart TVs will have advertising, and that's how you can get connected TV. Some are good, some are bad, but it's definitely an option for sure. I forgot to include that one. It's good. Yeah.
Can you talk about the volume per format? So, for example, like you're saying, you can get something for $20 CPM, but to get even one click to your site, how many of those thousands do you need to buy?
That's a tough one because that's, if you're, you can, one part of programmatic is what's called, not transparency, viewability. So viewability is a term you'll hear a lot, and viewability is basically, is the ad viewable, all right? Because when you load a page, right, and the page is, long and has content all the way to the bottom, not every time you scroll all the way to the bottom, but regardless whether you scroll or not, it still loads, right? So there usually is some sort of footer banner or something. That banner, that advertiser is getting charged for an impression that nobody has seen. What's that?
Because it loads.
Because it loads, exactly. Because it loads. But so viewability has become one of the main benchmarks in programmatic when determining, how successful a campaign is or not. And it's also an option in most platforms to only bid on, inventory that's at least 50% viewable. And 50% is kind of like the IAB standard that has been set for viewability. So, and then so if they view it, they have a lot more chances of clicking, By the way, I'm sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
I was just going to ask you, what kind of information do you get after you do the purchase, right? What kind of information do you get about who did you reach? How do you know that you really got the whatever it is 1,000 exposures that you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a certain element of trust, or you can use an ad server. So an ad server, for those that don't know, is basically a third-party verification company. And it tells you we blocked these types of sites, etc. So you can use that.
But if you don't use that?
If you don't use that, I mean, the best thing I can tell you is to have some sort of, like if you're, and this is the problem with brands that like to only run branding campaigns. Clicks and impressions don't really tell you anything, I think. So I always encourage brands to have some sort of action taken. So that way, if the campaign is running and you can take into account ad fraud, which at least some percentage of it is going to be, take into account non-viewability, which some of it's going to be, but you still have the ROI that you're after, then, it's worth it.
But in a situation like that where you do a branding campaign, for example, if you set up unique IDs, or in this case UTMs, for each of the things that you're running, you can then do it either through Adobe or through Google or whatever the case may be. You can still track performance-wise at the end of the day how it performs as far as clicks and everything like that for verification. You don't necessarily use an ad server per se. If you have unique URLs for each thing you're doing to track, let's say, the partners you do.
You can track, well, if you're using Google Analytics, you can track click-through data. It doesn't account for view-through impressions. That's the only thing. Yeah.
How do you pass on the cost to the client? So in the beginning, you pay $1.15 for the impression. Are you just doing a markup? Are agencies working on a fee? Like, what's the standard?
Right. Well, there's different models to that, and a lot of now that I'm not in an agency, I can tell you what the dirty. Basically, I mean, it's a lot more transparent now, but what will happen is that agencies, to do it the right way, what is usually agreed upon with the client is a certain margin. So the client agrees to a 20-25% margin, which is kind of like where it's at. Then you run the campaign. You either optimize to, or usually the platforms have a box or option to put in the amount of margin that you are to keep for yourself or to pay the traders. And we don't work for free here. So that's one way. Another way is to just charge by a media spend fee. And then that's usually if the client has their own account.
Is the terminology when you add that margin gross versus net? Do you still use that for programmatic buying?
Just margin. Yeah, margin. Yeah.
I just want to go back to the different formats. So a lot of people don't think that display does very well because people don't usually even click on it. So I just wanted to give an anecdote. I recently did a private deal with New York Magazine. 3.2 million impressions equals about 2,500 click-throughs. So you are paying for 3.2 million impressions to get those click-throughs. Some of them will be fraud. Some of them will be bots. Some of them will be by accident. You trying to close the ad.
Yeah.
And then if your standard conversion is about 10%, then you're paying, for 3.2 million impressions for about 300 conversions.
Yeah. It's not every campaign is going to work with programmatic. I'm running one right now for an app that I couldn't get it to work because the costs are too high. So you got to ultimately consider what's best for your client or for you if you're a brand. And as much as I talk about today, we're talking about programmatic, but it may not be the right solution for your campaign.
Are these all CPM?
Yeah, that's the thing. Like the basis of selling inventory online is by CPM. Platforms that sell it to you on a CPC basis just basically arbitrage CPM through click-through and then sell it that way. But everything is sold through CPM. Yes?
Well, charging the client, wouldn't you say you have to split for creative and copywriting on top of the fee?
I'm sorry, to split between creative and copywriting?
Yeah, like you're gonna get whatever, we use the word margin, but
Okay, so what, you just found the ad placement, or you just basically, I think you gotta charge for the creator as well?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, but that's a part.
Yeah, but that's like a retainer.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
That's a different job function.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah, but I
finance.
would say, I think it would be smart to include.
You could. Why not? Then there's some networks that will give you the creative creation if you buy through them. Or you can do those ugly automated banner ads that are like some text and a picture. But yeah, creative. If you're a trader, you're not making banners. You know, if you're trading programmatic and you're not writing ad copy, for sure. So that should be charged apart, I think, especially copywriting, because that's a great skill to have. But I mean, it's incredibly difficult, much harder than this. For sure.
So how do you explain that to, because, okay, just because you're doing a communications plan, not every client knows every single item broken down, so I'm saying, okay, let's say.
If they don't understand it, just include it in whatever price you're gonna price them, and then you know whatever. It's better to convince them or confuse them. That's for the world. Yeah.
But I mean, you are at a disadvantage because you have to sell the money Facebook makes, or the money Google makes, or the money that these ad softwares make. Like, you have to convince your client to spend $10,000, and you're not even making that money. You're giving it away to somebody else. So it is a harder sell for the person on the client side. Yeah, it's tough. It's not easy. And like I said, if you're a consultant on your own, you're not gonna, unless you have a lot of cash flow, you're not gonna be able to agree to these terms. Appnexus, for example, is $1,000 a month just to use it, on top of the 15% or 20% fee that they're charging you for the media. So it can get expensive quite quickly. So in your case, for example, let's say you don't want to manage the campaign yourself because you don't have a trader, you don't know it, or you don't have time, whatever. You can go to a lot of these platforms and they will run what's called managed service. And in managed service, basically you're going to wind up paying like 40 to 45% of the media going right back to the platform. So it can be super expensive in that regard. Yes.
So when it comes to optimization the campaign, once you have it running, like what tips do you have?
Yeah.
And especially when it comes to conversions, because I'm used to buying programmatic through a media vendor. So I just write an email and say, just get me those conversions. I don't care what you're doing, just do it. So when it comes to if I'm the trader, like what are
usually what I do is you run, I would say, any campaign. And here's the problem with a lot of clients. They want to see immediate results, and I understand, but programmatic is somewhat like SEO, where it takes a couple of, rarely do you have a campaign that right off the bat starts and you're getting leads immediately. Because what happens is most of these platforms have an algorithm that requires at least 30 days of learning. So if your client is open-minded, you would tell them, look, let's take 10% of the budget and let's test. Right? And within that testing, you kind of see what works and what doesn't. And then the rest of the budget you will run on kind of a known factor as far as what works already. But if I had to optimize, I mean, you can start with a lot of different things. You can start with, time of day, days specifically. Some things just don't convert on weekends. Sites, so you run a site domain report. To see which one, if you have there's a lot of game sites, for example, on Open Exchange, Programmatic, those things are just either fraud or just clicks or mistake clicks. I'd separate out campaigns sometimes from desktop to mobile, even though in an ideal world it would work, in unison. But depending on your client's, action that they want to take, if you have some long ass form, you don't want to have that on a mobile. So domains, hour, dates, days, a few things like that to start off. Banners. A lot of times the 300 by 250 works well, and you can stop all the other ones if you need to. I have a client who's 160 by 600 is the best performing. I've never seen that before, but it works. So
So a lot of A/B testing.
It's a lot of testing. I mean, if you don't like the detail-oriented work, don't go into because your head is going to be in an Excel or a platform. Yeah. So yeah, be careful with budgets. Most platforms have a like a safety cap, not to spend more than whatever you determine per day, because what was happening early on, some people would forget. I forgot once to put a budget limit on the day, and I mean, when you have access to everything online, you can spend $1 million, $2 million easily. And it did happen to somebody, some trader, spent about $2 million in access in a day. So
when you're a trader, there's a lot in conversion that's out of your control, right?
That's
like
true.
Calls to action, different creative, different copies, stuff like that. Like you can't go blaming your ad guy for something having a bad call to action.
Yeah, that's a great point. And a lot of times, I think trader types are very kind of technical. Oh, and I'll get into the hiring. One point I want to make on hiring. But if your client's website sucks, which a lot of them do, and their landing page has no call to action, or just doesn't work. I mean, no matter what advertising or placements you buy, it's just not going to work. So it's also good to get comfortable with determining, or at least convincing them to do A/B testing, and having an eye for things that work. If they don't have somebody to create landing pages for them, I don't know, put them on Instapage or something like that, and make the landers for them. But yeah, as far as hiring here in Miami, there was a recruiter last time in the other talk we did, and she was telling me about how difficult it is to find somebody with programmatic experience. And I had that problem when I was at Havas, because really nobody has that much experience in digital, period, not just programmatic. I found that hiring college students with degrees in economics or finance that are willing to learn perform extremely well in programmatic. So keep that in mind if you need to hire. And just, in about 3 months, if they're smart, they pick it up and they do well.
Because they have to number.
It's a number. It's a detail-oriented thing. You gotta constantly check. Yeah. If you're a creative type, I suggest you don't go into.
Looking at my students here. I'm looking at my students here. They have to numbers.
So, anything else?
A stupid question. Like some of the native ad things like Outbrain, are those through programmatic?
You can.
Okay.
You can. I did a private deal through. It's just weird. I did a private deal through Taboola in order to buy MSN in another country because they represent them. So that's why I tell you sometimes it's not black and white. So you got to kind of find who represents who. But those things they're not technically programmatic, I would say, but could be. You can buy them.
When importing your own list of people, do they have the same requirements as Facebook's including transparency of where you're picking people from, or how you received all that information or data?
I think I haven't actually done that in a while. I don't know with the new GDPR law, especially in Europe. I don't know if they're taking that into account here as well. I know some publishers are, because a lot of them got ready just in case. But I'd have some sort of way to authenticate your data, because it's very easy to scrape a list of emails off the internet and just upload it. There's even tools to scrape user IDs, emails, and phone numbers from Facebook if you have your profile settings to open, So.
And LinkedIn and Twitter.
Yeah, all those things. Cool. Anything else? If not, reach out to me and I'll answer your questions. I know it's a lot to take in, and thank you guys.
That was awesome.